What's going on, everyone? What's going on? Things are a little big all over the place. I made some changes and did some things were just going crazy. So now I gotta figure out what the hell is working and what's not working. Well, mic is working, so that's good. I know there were some other sounds that weren't really coming in. Uh, it's all basically the fact that I just didn't have enough time to work on some things that I needed to do today. Anyway, for those of you who actually do show up, welcome to an episode of Opinionated. I am not on my normal system, so some things are just really different right now. With that being the case, this won't be a long stream because I do want to sort some of this out, and I do have other things I need to do. Preparing for leaving the city later this week. And but I did want to cover a couple of things that I wanted to say with you guys. And I one of the things I wanted to go over was pretty much what the title is, and that's the truth about the gig, basically the gig work, the gig economy. For those who already know, for someone like me, I am currently a gig worker. So there are employers who pay for my particular services to do particular tasks with them, but there are some financial constraints that do come with it. And then the question is, at least from my point of view, is the gig economy going to be the future of what we're doing in the future, or are we going to go back to traditional work? So that's something we need to figure out as well. Before that, I see that there's some kind of weird thing that's happening over here. So give me one quick moment to take a look at this. Not really sure what the heck that is, but it's pretty much just gonna be a short, like I said, a short stream for today. Like it sounds, I have no idea what's being picked up in the background because for some reason it's warm out. So because it's warm out, everybody's busy right now. Anyway, for people who are actually out there, they work in the job market and they work in a regular 9 to 5. There's been this big thing that's on the rise. Of course, it's been the gig economy, and the gig economy has pretty much popped up ever since. Well, it's always been around for a long time. But then the question is, with the most recent changes that we've had throughout the world, is we saw the rise of people deciding to become independent, take back their time, as it were, because quite frankly, industries are no longer being as caring about their employees anymore. And to be honest with you, now businesses don't really care unless you have a small enough business that is really communal with the people that they're with. Larger industries that look to really uh, benefit off the talents of their people that they have. If the industry is too large, quite frankly, they just don't really care. The question is to how large that industry is, or how exactly do they serve the community, or is it about the product being the bottom line? Is really the things that you have to look for when you're actually being in one of these companies. And you might be in one of these companies right now. But let's get a little bit into it because I want to start taking a look at some of these things. And in this video, I'm trying to remember what this video was. I believe this is basically an over collapse of what's going on to just try to get everybody on the page of it in case you didn't know what the gig economy is really about.
Companies are doing mass layoffs while complaining about not being able to find enough employees. Some workers are min-maxing the system by working multiple full-time jobs at the same time, while others need to work hours of unpaid overtime at just one job. This is not to mention that the gig economy is consuming entire sections of the workforce. The 9 to 5 was created by American labor unions in the 1800s and became mainstream over 100 years ago, when jobs looked like this and this.
So, as you can obviously see, there has always been a time where people have always been around and working on gigs and such. But the difference is that over the expansion of time, people have basically technology has changed, has everything. Uh, it's no longer as hardworking labor force anymore. There are definitely still labor jobs. Don't get me wrong. There always will be, in my opinion. But as we basically change the idea of what actual work is, the idea of people reclaiming their time has also changed. How people spend their time has also changed. In fact, there was a time where I believe we didn't even work basically 9 to 5. So this now big shift is something I find that's really, really interesting because there are other countries, believe it or not, that I don't even think they work, you know, 8, 12 hours. I don't think they do 40-hour work weeks. And I should really dive into that to figure out what are those particular areas that actually do that, because I think that that's something that we should start looking forward to. Not looking forward, well, yeah, probably looking forward to, but that's something we should be looking into and saying that that's something that we might be pushing forward in our economy of the US. Because with a lot more jobs that are doing stay at home and such, I can tell you as someone who works as a good worker that I can get a particular task done where it would take me literally a day or two or only a couple of hours, depending on what the actual task is. And yet I am being shackled to an 8-hour shift. And that also puts a lot of strain on the managers or whoever your overseer is, because then they have to constantly get feedback from you or constantly, how do I say, lord over you for something that quite frankly should be easy to do. I think if you are assigned, if you are hired to do a specific task, once you have said task done, you should be able to be on your way. Now, I can see how this is different for a lot of people because maybe you're someone who gets paid hourly and not necessarily by a particular task, and that really is really different based on what the actual call for work is. Because maybe you're doing something that is task oriented, and maybe you are there to do a particular thing for a particular set of hours. And that's the thing about the gig economy that's just so different. But there are other things that we do look for that can be a hindrance when it comes to people who work in the gig force. But I wonder if this is going to explain it. I didn't really go into the videos. I saw the titles of them, and I just kind of wanted to jump into them because I have a feeling that they're gonna touch on things that I have relearned since joining that force.
It was revolutionary for its time. But how many of the modern problems in corporate America are caused by trying to make an outdated system fit with every single modern job?
To the U.S., 8.4 million people in the nation are working multiple jobs.
850,000 jobs. Wages went up for American workers.
Instead, they're working multiple jobs. It's called being overemployed.
One part-time, but I need both of them to pay my bills every month, my rent and groceries, so just working all the time.
A report by the management consulting firm McKinsey &
Working all the time. You know, when they talk about all of these people, all of these Americans working all these jobs, you know, having all this employment, they don't take into effect that it's the same American working multiple jobs. There are people who I can say on a regular who I know that work at least 2 jobs. I even hear there are people who are working 3, and I even heard of one person working. No, I heard one person working 4 jobs. One person, which I still think is absolutely insane. There's no reason why we should be able to do that. And part of it is because of the labor force. You know, we pay too much as far as when I say labor force, I mean we are paying too much into what we should be getting back from the system, but not necessarily getting back from the system. So let's just say if you're someone like me who lives in New York, especially New York City, then so now you're looking at your state tax, you're looking at your federal tax, you have to worry about FICA, you got to worry about insurance, you know, you're paying into Social Security, and then you're also paying a city tax. Like, that's a lot that really comes out of you. Then we're going to talk about, like, you have to cover everything else: food, rent, utilities. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot, and you'd be surprised how much you don't get back. And as a gig worker, you really have to take a lot of effort to basically pay off the things that are going to keep you sustained. So insurance, you know, worrying about all your other expenditures as well. Because quite frankly, as a gig worker, some people are going to debate this because, you know, everybody's different in all kind of industries. But as a gig worker, like, they're looking to pay you kind of less than they would a full-time employee. Some are going to say that's not necessarily true, and the truth of the matter is that you've just been able to finagle a way for you to get extra wages, but that doesn't work for a lot of people across the nation. Some people are just being paid less, but some people, they haven't been working in a set industry for so long. So of course, that's another reason as to why they don't have a vast amount of compensation. But let's get into
Company found that 2/3 of the average human's wealth is in the work they can do over their lifetime. Everybody has time, effort, and experience they can trade for money, and those tradable commodities are worth twice as much as all the other assets that the average person possesses. A regular 9-to-5 job has been a great way for billions of people to safely exchange a predictable amount of their time for a predictable paycheck, with predictable career advancement as they gain more experience. But this one-size-fits-all model for work doesn't fit with every job, and trying to make it work has been bad for employees and bad for companies for 3 reasons, which is causing 3 equally terrible trends in the job market. The first trend is that it makes time a worthless asset. The Ford Motor Company was one of the first businesses in America to adopt the 9-to-5 40-hour work week. Henry Ford did this to make his company the most attractive place for auto workers to get a job. This allowed him to pull talent away from other automakers without paying his workers more. In order to compete with Ford, other automakers were forced to offer the same 40-hour work week with paid overtime. Eventually, in order to
So that's where we're getting our 40-hour work week. And they said overtime as well. So I'm assuming that everybody else also picked up that as well as being the actual standard. Interesting.
compete with the automakers, other companies were also forced to offer 9-to-5 jobs so that their best workers didn't quit and go and work on the car assembly line. These auto workers had tightly defined and repetitive tasks, so unless the workers succumbed to exhaustion, they could do a consistent amount of work for every hour they spent at their post, and every additional hour would produce the same amount of output. If you work in a modern office job, you will know that your work is nothing like this. Sometimes there is a lot to do, and sometimes there is nothing to do. But you still need to be there 8 hours a day, looking busy no matter what. Back when the 40-hour week was being fought for by workers' unions, most Americans worked in manufacturing. But today, most people work in the services sector, which is more diverse than you might expect. Unless you are working on a farm or in a factory, you are a service worker, and your job could be anything from making strategic corporate decisions to making coffees.
And those areas, of course, are dwindling. They are dwindling so fast because, quite frankly, companies cannot afford to keep them anymore. It's just not happening. Companies are not affording to be able to keep these people anymore because, quite frankly, a lot of people are losing revenue. Like when you say the service industry, you'd be surprised how many service jobs are not the areas that are being picked up anymore. Hey, what's going on, Locksmith Jeremy? What's going on, man? And we don't really have that anymore. It's not a thing that we're all picking up on anymore. Garbage men, things like that. These are jobs that I think that are still good, still areas that. Is it? I had a bit of a mess up today, so I'm not on my normal settings, so everything's a little weird. You said my mic is low. Hold on. Is this better? Let me know. Just let me know if that's better. Oh yeah, my mic was down like freaking 15%. So hopefully that's a little better. But yeah, there are a lot of service jobs that are not necessarily being picked up in the way that they normally would. And outside of service, you have to think of sales. You also have to think of retail. These are the big jobs that a lot of people actually have. So I'm sorry, a lot of your service jobs are not like people who are like doctors, nurses, things like that. Pharmacists are still needed very much. So it's very interesting how they're looking at it that way.
Clearly, these jobs are very different, and should have a different schedule. But most of the corporate world has tried to make the 9-to-5 fit all jobs. But this doesn't work, because no service jobs have tasks consistently delivered on a fine-tuned production line. Work comes and goes as internal and external customers make demands, and that means when people are busy and need to do more than 8 hours in a day to finish their work, they are expected to work, quote, reasonable unpaid overtime. According to an ADP Research Institute study of office professionals, unpaid overtime jumped to an average of 9.2 hours per week in 2021, more than a full extra day to keep up with employer demands. But when there is little to no work to do because a project has just been completed or sales are seasonally slow, workers are still expected to put in the 40 hours a week because that's what the business is paying them for. If you're in this kind of job, your best option is to try and find something that makes you look busy. But if you don't have something to work on, you are probably going to be given meaningless tasks just to fill.
Absolutely. Oh, this is the stuff that I had to deal with all the time. And I'm pretty sure many other people deal with it as well. Like we're not paid by task. We're paid by the hour. And the idea is that if you sit around looking like you're doing nothing, of course they want to slam you with extra work or tedious stuff that has nothing to do with you or even what you're supposed to be compensated for. That's where you get the whole task as assigned kind of BS. You have all the things that you should be doing, but because you don't look busy, someone wants to throw other things at you. Rather than you're open, which means that you're either bored or well rested, and you could be more of a benefit to help. But I would say this: if you don't have anything to do, you're gonna have to do something that typically you didn't want to do before, or maybe you do like to do that, and that's go around in your company, whatever kind of company you have, and make yourself useful. Don't always make yourself available, but make yourself useful. This is a good time to actually build rapport.
The mandatory 8-hour day. If this was just another story about companies screwing over their workers with outdated business practices, it wouldn't need a video. But the 40-hour work week isn't even good for companies. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why we might be in the midst of the overdue collapse of the 9-to-5. This week's lesson was sponsored by Manscaped. It's time to throw away that bulky beard trimmer you've been using for years and make an upgrade. According to data from the US Census Bureau, McKinsey & Company, and compiled by Statista, growth in gig work and freelance jobs have outgrown typical permanent jobs by 500% over the last decade. Gig work apps have become very popular with unskilled workers due to their low barrier to entry and flexible working arrangements. Someone with a phone and a bike can start working for a food delivery service like Uber Eats, Postmates, DoorDash, Grubhub, or all of them all at the same time in less than an hour by filling out an online form.
That's gonna work.
This has been a highly appealing alternative to minimum wage jobs that still rely on the antiquated process of handing in a resume, spending weeks doing job interviews, only to still get ghosted by a fast food joint offering $7.25 an hour for an unpredictable schedule. Gig work jobs usually also pay terribly, but people get to work as much as they want, when they want, and they can work around another full-time job for extra money. Even with all of the problems of gig work, you can see why it has become so popular. The popularity of freelancing and private contract.
So in case you don't know, yes, I just finished mentioning this. Gig work does tend to pay you less than if you were working in full-time employment, but the amount of freedom that you get back, it blows your mind. Because let's be honest, the reason why you're actually working in a full-time job of 8 hours, you could be working 12 hours, you could be working 16 hours, God bless you. But the reason why you're doing is that because you're trading in your time for money. If you could be able to make ends meet and you wouldn't be working that many hours, you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it. Unless this is your business and you enjoy working in your business, you wouldn't dare do it. I don't know anyone who's actually pleasantly looking forward, is ecstatic about working all damn day long or for the majority of a 24-hour span day. It's just crazy. So if that's your kind of thing, cool, because you want to, you want to expand something, you have a goal to get somewhere. But outside, when most people, they're doing it for compensation. If they were able to actually get by, there's no way in hell they would put forth those kind of hours. Be honest.
Has also exploded. This is more popular among skilled workers who can sell their services to businesses just like an employee, but with no ongoing agreement. They are only paid when there is work to be done. Private contracts are usually an agreed-upon price for an agreed-upon outcome, like $10,000 to build a company website, but they can also be billed hourly for roles like security, administrative assistants, or on-demand workers. According to a report by the management consulting firm Oliver Wyman, healthcare workers have been one of the fastest-growing groups of workers ditching typical permanent roles in favor of working as private contractors.
And the only reason why that really takes place is, quite frankly, just to be honest with you, we got a whole bunch of nurses. That's just really what it is. Some people like to do contract. I believe that's another reason why we got like all these travel nurses who do make a lot of money, by the way. But they've also been working in their fields for quite a long time. But this is just in the start of why we're talking about the gig economy and how it's been going so far. But what about those who've probably already been in the business for a little bit? So this is something terrible is happening. Oh, this is going to be very interesting. So let's hear what he's got to say about this. Let's see what he's going to say.
The 9-to-5 workday has been the golden standard for more than 100 years, but that might soon come to an end. Today, I'll share 3 reasons the 9-to-5 isn't working anymore, what might replace it, and how you can prepare yourself for the next few years.
So that would be interesting if he has a particular idea of what's going to replace the 9-to-5. Because I've been wondering if it's going to be the gig economy, but at the same time, the idea of paying someone lower wage for just to get a particular task done is a whole lot different. So if it won't be the actual gig economy, and we already know that automation is a big thing that's become a big issue, what's it going to be? I almost thought about having a conversation about automation, but I think I need to do a lot more research on it because the viewpoint in which I was trying to tackle it was already biased, and I'm pretty sure it would be like that for a lot of people, but who knows? I'll have to do a little bit more to see if I can actually find somewhere fair to be about it.
First, as Kendrick said, loyalty, loyalty, loyalty. Many of you probably remember your grandparents sharing stories about how they landed their first job at 18, they worked there for 47 years, and then they retired with a nice fat pension. The problem is that kind of company employee loyalty no longer exists. Today, many companies could not care less about their employees, which creates a self-perpetuating cycle of disengagement. In the company's eyes, you are just a cog in a machine. If you disappear tomorrow, the company would just replace you with another cog, as if you never existed. And workers are beginning to realize this. That's why worker loyalty now goes to the companies willing to pay them the most and willing to treat them right. But the story might get even worse. A 2023 study found that layoffs and employee departures lead to more work and expectations for the employees who remain. They're expected to answer emails without delay, participate in Slack channels 24/7, attend every Zoom meeting, and do the job of 3 people, somewhere in between all of that. And sure, employees who stick through this increased workload might get rewarded with a 2%, maybe 3% raise at the end of each year, but nowadays, that feels like more of a slap in the face than anything else. Next, Benjamin Franklin once said, "Time is money," describing the belief that more time working leads to more money, which made sense decades ago when manufacturing was a big part of our economy. During the Industrial Revolution, the number of hours you worked directly tied to how much you produced, and ultimately how much money could be made. For example, in a car manufacturing factory, an 8-hour shift equated to about 1,000 cars, and that would be consistent across shifts and across the employees, which is why companies relied heavily on punch cards to monitor 8-hour shifts day in and day out. The problem is, we're still following a work system designed nearly 100 years ago.
Okay, I wonder what he's gonna lean towards. We kind of already just gone through this in the last video, but I wonder what he's gonna lean towards, because I'm really interested now in his perspective on what's gonna be the thing that changes, because we are still using a very, I'm just gonna say, archaic system for manufacturing. Like, a lot of us, when we are thinking about producing, right, we're in a very much a big digital centric world. It's not really putting together cars. I mean, even if you're working for, say, like Ford or GM or something like that, yes, you are doing some work, but it's not nearly the amount of work as back in the days where they're doing it. Like, you do have a lot of automation that helps you along the way. There are no big, large, astronomically large teams there assembling stuff. And especially, like he said, it was in 8 hours you could pump out 1,000 cars, and then there were several, shifts of 8 hours. Think of that versus the actual automation time that we have now. Even though I'm not too sure how many cars that we're actually developing on a regular basis with an 8-hour shift today, I assume it would still be more if we were still pumping out the amount of cars needed like back then. But I'm wondering what else he's talking about. So he talks about 9 to 5. What will replace? Okay, here we go. Let's take a look at this.
Year. So clearly, the traditional 9-to-5 workday isn't beneficial to workers or companies. So what's the alternative? According to several studies, the alternative to the 9-to-5 job, gig work, is growing at an unprecedented pace. But when I say gig work, you're probably imagining your friendly neighborhood Uber driver or Instacart delivery guy. But gig work is so much more than that. By definition, it's basically any work performed by an independent contractor. There's graphic designers, caregivers, tutors, and more. In 2022, 4 million Americans did some kind of gig and freelancing work. But just 1 year later, in 2023, that number jumped to 64 million Americans.
All right, so that makes a lot of sense. First of all, a few things already happened throughout that time, right? We had already gone past our prominent lockdown that happened throughout the country. So a lot of people needed to figure out how to work. And then throughout that entire stretch, we also had to worry about the fact that people didn't want to go back to work, which people already know as the Great Resignation, because they were able to start leveraging other things at this point. While there were some people that twiddled their thumbs and wondering, could they go back to work, right? You had people that were sitting there now all of a sudden learning trades. They were able to start doing all these online gigs such as Uber Eats or DoorDash or Seamless or Grubhub or whatever the heck else. People were able to start leveraging media apps in order to help gain themselves business. Then you have things that popped up and started being more big and started taking people with low amounts of experience to start working a set amount of time per task. They didn't have to waste their time anymore. So I can see the appeal where enough people in that 2020 margin who didn't go back to work, and not everybody who actually, once the ban was lifted and people can actually start going back to work, not everybody was able to go back to a job. Some companies overhired. mainly they were tech companies. And those people actually lost their jobs in 2021, 2022. Actually, 2022. That's when you had Google, you had Microsoft, you even had Tesla, I believe, just drop a whole lot of people. So I can see the reason why we went from 4 million to basically 64 million Americans working on gigs, because at least within those years of margin, they were able to do stuff. Because there are people who actually learned to be in the tech industry during the actual pandemic, while people were still wondering if they were even going to have a job. There were people who were actually sitting in online classes learning to do tech work. So I definitely can see why this particular thing jumped up.
Or 38% of the US workforce. And the contributions this has on the economy is huge. In 2014, freelancers contributed $715 billion to the economy, but in just 9 years, in 2023, that number reached $1.27 trillion. So it's clear that gig work is becoming a significant force in redefining the traditional work structures and going so far as to permeate corporate America.
So tell you what, let's just be honest. I don't know how many of you have actually worked gig work before, right? I'm not saying part-time job. That's still an hourly based job. It doesn't matter if you had a job and you basically got the task done in 2 hours. That doesn't mean much. Would you be in favor of, I don't even want to say in favor of gig work being a standard? But would you say that would be a healthy alternative to people who don't want to work part-time? That if they can come in and get a particular task, done, because you're essentially just helping out. That's just really what you're doing. There are plenty of people who are part-time who do nothing with their time. Now, you have insurance, you have companies that are paying out insurance, paying out all this other stuff for you, and it's really costing them a lot more money too, believe it or not. As well as the fact that you're sitting there for all those hours, then you're looking at your paycheck coming through at the end of a week or at the end of 2 weeks or a month, and you're not really seeing everything that you want back from it. So what do you think? Do you think that working a gig job will be a healthy alternative if people can start paying a little bit more for people who worked?
2021, 71% of hiring managers said they plan to sustain or increase their use of freelancers in the future. But the big question now is, why is gig work becoming so popular? Looking back the past few years, it's clear that the 9-to-5 work structure is going through a pivotal time, a catalyst that laid the foundation for how work was about to change forever. It signaled two essential elements. First, the workers. When it comes to the traditional 9-to-5, it usually means you're working Monday to Friday, reporting to a boss, and told where you need to be at all times. But with a gig worker, you're your own boss. You can determine when, where, and who you want to work for. If you want to take Friday off, go ahead. If you want to start working later or end a little earlier, why not? Today, flexibility is becoming more important than ever, with 72% of workers saying work-life balance is a critical factor when choosing where to work. People want to spend time with their family, rediscover their hobbies, or travel without being limited by 7 vacation days a year. To them, the flexibility of gig work offers them a way out. And it's not about being lazy. Studies show that people work best when they have control over their schedules. They're happier and 21% more productive. And knowledge work depends on optimal brain function, and optimal brain function depends on physical and emotional well-being. But it's not just workers who prefer gig work. Many companies have recently been announcing layoffs and hiring freezes to maintain profits and reduce costs in anticipation of a worsening economy. The problem is, businesses can't just stop hiring people altogether. They still need workers to grow or maintain their operations.
But they're just making do with the actual employees that they have now. It's not a work smarter, not harder kind of thing that they're still doing. That's not what they're doing. It's literally the opposite. They're making the current employees that they have literally work harder now because they refuse to actually hire the help. No, so you already have people that worked on contract that just worked by task. And now you want to hire those people on, but you want to hire on freelancers or contractors in this thing. You want to hire contractors to then still work 8-hour gig jobs. No, that's not the reason why they're doing that. And you want to pay them less than you would pay an actual full-time employee. That's crazy. They don't want to do that. This is the reason why there's a big fight against all that.
So who are they going to hire?
Oh, what's good, OG?
In 2022, 78% of business leaders said they're more likely to hire freelancers than full-time employees during uncertain economic times for 3 reasons. First, flexibility. Similar to why workers prefer freelancing, businesses prefer freelancers too. It's less risky than hiring a permanent employee who needs to be paid whether there's any work for them or not. Freelancers, on the other hand, are hired on a clearly defined budget and project, meaning companies don't have to worry about finding them new work, them doing fake work, or running out of funding. Next, it's faster to hire. A LinkedIn study found that the average time to hire someone is 41 days, which can get pretty expensive. There's multiple rounds of interviews, there's background and screening, and then weeks of training. On the other hand, companies can bring on a freelancer for a specific project in a matter of days. It can get even messier if companies realize that they hired the wrong person for the job. If it's a permanent employee, it can be tough to navigate through mountains of paperwork and bureaucracy to fire them, but if it's a freelancer, companies can easily let them go. Next, studies show that it's 20 to 30% cheaper per year to hire a freelancer over a permanent employee because companies don't have to provide benefits like health insurance, paid vacation days, or retirement plans. For small to mid-sized companies,
And that's the plus slash nasty thing about being someone who's working as a gig worker. It's like you get the benefits of actually making your own schedule, negotiating a better fee for yourself, spending more time with family and friends for actually working on a specific task being asked for. Rather than you're being a wage slave and sitting around for endless hours, actually not being productive. We need to come up with a better system that's not the 8-hour system anymore. There are some countries, and I'm going to do a little bit of research to figure out which countries those are, that they don't work 8 hours. Some require you to work 5-hour shifts. Let's be honest. For those that work 8-hour shifts, right? Depending on the kind of job that you are, because maybe a good portion of your job, like people who work in like security, right? Or people who, I don't even know, maybe LA, you can tell me as a person, as a police officer, but there are people that just literally their job, as they're being paid to be sitting on time, is to be on standby in case ish happens. That's literally their role. Their role is to do that. So not everybody goes about their way to just turn around and just start working the moment they get into the door. And let's be honest, those who are actually on a time constraint to have to work 8-hour days, you're not productive for 8 hours. You may be seriously working for only 3 of those 8 hours. Just to be honest with you, you're really, thank you. Thanks for letting me know. You're really on standby. You really are waiting for something to happen. Definitely, if nothing happens your entire day, I mean, cool, you got paid for an entire day of doing nothing, but sitting by on standby and not doing anything is also a big waste of your time because you're sitting there thinking, I could have been at home, I could have been chilling, I could have been learning something, I could have been getting paid to actually do something I want to do. I could be learning something that I want to do. There's nothing like you're sitting at a job waiting for something waiting for something to happen. And at the same time, if you want to be diligent and do something else on the side, while you're still there, you're penalized for that. So imagine, I'll just make up something. So imagine, LA, say you're sitting there, you're waiting for time to go by, but you want to go read a book, and say your Sarge comes by and just says, "Yo, I don't want you on your book. I need you paying attention." And you're thinking, paying attention to what? I'm waiting for something to happen. And there are a lot of people who work on their jobs just like that. Whether you're working in customer service, whether you're working in like other areas of retail, you could be logistics, whatever. You're sitting around just waiting, rather than you know exactly when a truck is coming in. Let's just say you're a forklift driver. If you know when a truck is coming in, you have time as to when you have to come in, offload those trucks, put them down, put the product down to a particular area. Cool, and then you can leave. Then there should be a ground team who's going to take care of the division of the labor as to where the products are going to go. There's no reason why you, as a forklift driver, should just be sitting on your ass for endless hours for a job that's only going to take you about maybe 1 or 2 hours to actually do. You should get paid for that particular type of task that you're doing. If you have a certain amount of trucks that need to be done, you should be able to pick up that time. Now, I get that there are companies that they want things particularly done in the window because they have an operational window. But that operational window doesn't really work for a lot of people, especially those who are working on like logistics. Logistics pretty much works all around. So I find it very interesting that he pretty much has an understanding of that. But I haven't really heard from him. Is this an actual alternative? I think that we are actually going to be pushed more towards a gig workforce because companies don't want to pay out for everything else. Because believe it or not, it's not just about the hiring and firing or retraining. Yes, that's something that companies go through, but they actually do pay for a lot for you to be there because quite frankly, for all the hours that you are there, you're a liability. Believe it or not. Hate to say it that way. Most people don't look at it that way because most people don't own companies or don't, I'll say it, own people.
Who might not have a ton of capital, these cost savings can quickly add up. But if you're worried about what's gonna happen to your 9 to 5 over the next few years, here are 3 things you can start doing today to future-proof your career no matter what happens. First, build your career capital because it will be the stepping stone for everything else. In the book, Be So Good They Can't Ignore You, Cal Newport says your career capital is basically your skills, resources, and abilities that you accumulate throughout your career that allow you to have more leverage in life. The trick to building your career capital is accepting the fact that you don't know everything and that you can constantly learn more, because the truth is, a college degree isn't good enough to get a good job anymore. You need to constantly be upskilling to stand out from the competition, but more importantly, to be able to demand more money. When I realized the importance of career capital early on, I dedicated an hour or 2 every week to learn Python, a programming language, so I can do one thing. My biggest priority at the time was to max out my salary through my day job. My plan was pretty simple. It was to show that I could excel at work so I could aggressively push for pay raises and promotions. And if they said no, then I knew I had the career capital to just find a different company.
And that's where we got to. That's how we got to the people that we have now, who could turn around and just hightail it. Okay, cool. Well, I've been doing all this other stuff. You don't want me here anymore. You're not going to pay me whatever I'm worth or whatever I know I can get. So I'm just going to dip. And this is how you got the people that were basically staying around for maybe a year, 3 years. If you're lucky, they stayed for 5 years. They just be out. So I get it. I absolutely get that. And unfortunately, this is the kind of world that we are basically in today. This last video, I looked at the title of this video and I thought it might be interesting. So let's see. It was like how the gig work has ruined retirement. Oh, I wonder. Because it's hard for you to put money in for yourself.
The gig economy is going to break the world. And we millennials are first in line for this. Because there are 2 extreme and painfully different sides to the story of being a gig worker. Just take, for example, a digital nomad. They probably do consulting for various businesses. Maybe they're developers, or maybe UX designers, or marketers.
Okay, I have an issue with the digital nomads. Because if you ever seen those kind of social medias when it comes to these people, you know, I'm a tech worker. Oh, I do online sales. You know, work. That's where you get the whole work from home from anywhere in the world, because you always notice that they're like living in a hut somewhere, or they're always traveling in a different country. Or I do all my work, and then they got banana leaves around them. They in hut houses out in freaking Thailand and shit like that. Like, really? Oh yeah, and I make so much money. Not to be honest with you, you only make money and you're able to travel and live that kind of lifestyle because you're still being paid in American dollars. Let's just be honest. You can travel to other countries where the currency exchange is just so much higher in your favor. But come on, let's keep it a buck. If you were still here in the US, you probably wouldn't be living so much of a glamorous lifestyle. I just don't like the idea that they push that as if that's now the standard of being a freelance worker. I don't like it. It's freelancer porn. Just straight up. It's just what it is.
They're probably living the dream.
Wave, sunset, waves again.
So much more upliftment and energy and support from like my environment here.
Digital nomads are the poster child of this concept of gig economy. It's a powerful poster to sell this idea of freedom at work to everyone else. But the reality for most gig workers today is not even close to this.
Gig economy is something much less sophisticated, like poor worker conditions, always losing out. It seems to be the workers.
Injury or sickness isn't paid.
They're working for a tech company, all right, but their situation is very different. And I have to stop for a sec before we go on to say that I just can't be a hypocrite on this. I run a tech company, and for the 10 years that we've been in business, we've worked with dozens of gig workers. Because we run a business, because supply and demand, and we're paying them fairly as gig workers, as contractors for the work that they're doing. But in reality,
he was a little figuring out what he was gonna say right there. Yeah, because he was trying to say, do I really pay them fairly, or just pay them what I can, or what they negotiated? But is it fair? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what he pays for his workers. I don't know.
we are contributing to this snowball. It's a snowball that is
At least he admits that he's also part of the problem.
gonna blow up in our faces in a few years. So let's explore where this gig economy is gonna take our generation over the next few years. This is our new series, Millennials Decoded. When we research projects like these, the main problem that we have to deal with is sorting through this endless amount of information. In the last few years, it's become increasingly difficult to separate good information from bad, or to even know where that information is coming from. And our sponsor today is looking to solve that. It's a company called Ground News. It's a website and an app that lets you quickly drill down into any story to see what's really going on with gig workers.
More than 1,000 drivers are now on strike.
We are not going to stop until that raise is given back.
I spend more time here than what I do at home.
We're gonna go down a grim rabbit hole today. But before that, let me make something very clear. As a consumer, as a business, the gig economy is great.
Wait. Okay, can I just say something else as well? As much as the gig economy has been really good, as far as people who can now become the mass amount of delivery drivers that we see these days, let's just be honest. These companies, while they're able to benefit from people who are actually doing that so that these people can get a little bit of extra dollars in their pocket, there's also something else that we're not looking at when it comes to that. And I'm happy that he brought up food. There are so many people that cannot cook anymore because of how much the convenience has been for people to get food. So there are probably a lot of restaurant industries, or just greasy spoons, basically, shitty food, that are now getting so much money because they're peddle their food out to so many people, compared to the time where they just, from places that I did not know, or places that I didn't necessarily want to eat from, but simply because they were the only ones that were still open, I ordered from them and had the food and just said, this food was trash. It was trash. But I spent my money on it. But I would have never noticed them on my own, because they would have been like freaking 5 miles away, and there's no way in the hell I was ever gonna go out there. I would have had to go to my immediate area or cook. But because of that, we have so many people who are unable to cook, which also brings up to the point where how long before just being able to know how to cook and building a business off of that will become a hot commodity? Because right now, a lot of the fast food that we're seeing, and let's just be honest, it's just fast food, burger joints, pizza, things like that. These things are becoming the hallmark, and actual traditional foods are things that are becoming very scarce. Actual restaurants are becoming very scarce because people will order out regular fast food on a regular basis, but they will spend tons of money, say on dates, to go to a place that actually does actual dining. So it's very interesting.
Yes, I know many gig workers struggle. Yes, it's a time bomb. Yes, I know it's gonna screw us up in the future. But I'd like my burger hot and cheap and delivered in 20 minutes. So we're launching this
Not cheap. Liar.
new product in a couple weeks, and we needed a logo for it. We have designers in house, but we always like to do this thing. We like to use this platform, and I don't want to say which platform it is, because I think it's such a bad deal for the gig workers, but it's such a great deal for the company. We offered $500 to designers to come and apply with their logos, and we have these are all designs that have been withdrawn and declined and whatnot, but we had 400 applications, and eventually picked this one. But here's the deal: we only pay the winner The winner got the $500 that we offered, but everybody else worked for free. And so for a business, this is a fantastic deal. This is as good as it gets to get 400 candidates for logos and just pick your favorite. As a gig worker, this absolutely sucks. But hold on.
So you had 400 people who put in their time, their sweat, their effort for an opportunity, and at the end of it all, only one person got paid. Jeez, that's horrible. That's horrible. That's horrible. I don't know what site he was using, but people need to look at your portfolio beforehand to see, and then they decide to make a deal with you. And then you do that back and forth. They just all do their submissions for free. He had basically 400 people, so he had potentially 400 choices, and only one got paid, so the rest of them just wasted their time and effort. That's just horrible. He likes it because he got a great deal, but other people, they had their time wasted, and shame on them for entering in that deal.
But with the current rules, in the world that we live in a free capitalist market, this is fair game. I mean, they agreed to do the work, they agreed to the terms and the compensation.
I hear that.
We both won on this transaction, right? This all works because the supply and demand balance exists. And a huge problem that nobody likes to talk about is that better pay risks breaking this balance. Here's the simplest way you can visualize it. Let me explain that. A few years ago, California passed this law that made it more strict for companies to determine whether someone that's working for them is a contractor / a gig worker or an employee. Now, I'm not gonna stop on that debate. We're not here to solve that. I'm not gonna solve this debate by just speaking into a camera. It's a big issue, expensive lawyers, etc. But this law was drafted with one specific company in mind.
Uber, of course.
Now think about the way Uber positions driving with them. Ride sharing, freedom, anytime, anywhere. Ride sharing sounds so nice. It's like, I'm gonna go somewhere, I'm gonna share my ride with someone. You guys remember this? You guys remember this publicity? I'm sure they used at some point, like, you're gonna save the world, save the planet, and, avoid pollution by ride sharing and saving gas. When Uber started, like, driving with them was this really, like, this cool way to make some extra money. And all of this was some great marketing. It sold the dream of making your own schedules, being your own boss. Heck, call it being an entrepreneur, being an Uberpreneur. But we all know how Uber really works for drivers.
I lost $97,000 because of you. You dropped the prices on black. Yes, you did. We started with $20. Some people don't like to take responsibility for their They blame everything. Well, why you sending an email for town car? Good luck. Good luck to you too. But I know you don't gonna go far.
This is Fawzi Kamel, who had the misfortune of driving the founder and the then CEO of Uber, and capturing the video that eventually got.
Imagine you picking the fight with the CEO of your company. You really thought that was gonna last for you? Jesus Christ.
That guy fired. But this issue was over 5 years ago, guys. Like, this problem of low fares, of broken promises, it's an old problem. And it's happening with Uber all over the world. But Uber was built precisely on this premise. The reason why Uber exists is because the rules allowed it to exist in its current form. It was designed with those rules in mind, precisely to take advantage of how traditional cabs that work on a different set of rules wouldn't be able to compete. And it worked. They're barely slipping through legislation cracks, but as of today, they're mostly on the right side of the law. Mostly. And then, again, this is a free market. Uber is just connecting people who need to make money, willing to provide a service with people who need that service and are willing to pay for it. But AB 5 and other similar laws are a big problem for Uber. It could truly put them out of business. Because
I don't think that Uber's going to be put out of business. If anything, Uber would be bailed out like many other companies have, because quite frankly, it provides a need and a service that has never been seen before. Because when Lyft, who tried to be a competitor for Uber, tried to get into it, they did not survive. And there are probably some people that are still taking Lyft, but that's not nearly what pops up anywhere on my apps or anything. It's always been Uber. Uber's always been prominent. If I get notifications, damn for sure it comes from Uber. It does not come from anywhere else. So Uber will not be gone because, quite frankly, it provided so many means for people to be able to travel, for people to be able to move around. Because if anybody who understands being around a yellow cab or cab system that has their own particular system in place, is that they jack up the prices. And if you didn't have a place, if you didn't have a company like Uber, let's just say people started making their own stuff. Let's just say people started putting out their own ride share or just ride accessibility on like a Craigslist or something. They're gonna jack the hell out of the prices. So there's been plenty of people who took advantage of Uber. So Uber's not going nowhere.
Uber. Why do we like Uber? We like it because it's convenient. We like it because it's safe. But in the end, we use Uber because the price seems right.
Here are 5 ways to get a cheaper Uber ride.
The math that we did for Brooklyn, but it is.
So he's talking about the payroll costs right now.
It's really similar across most developed countries. Now, as an employee, you might or might not suffer over those 30% that you're giving to the tax man, but most people have no clue how much their employer is really paying to have them sit in the office. Because if you stack your payroll taxes, that there are payroll taxes that also come out of the employer's end. If you stack medical insurance, pension matching, paid vacation, if you're a startup, there's a real possibility that you can go out of business. So if you're responsible, you should be saving up a little bit of your employees' potential severance payment if the company goes out of business. Well, that number goes 30% more in the US and up to 50% more in other countries around the world. That's how much that employee costs the company.
And nobody, or I'm not gonna say nobody, the majority of people do not understand that. They only understand that on paper. Oh, I'm making 60K. Once everything hits you, what you're really getting at the end of a month, how much you really have for the end of the year. Because we're talking about that's your gross versus what your net. And people don't really pay attention as to what your actual employer puts out. And when I had to learn these things, I was just like, wait, how much per head? What? Huh? You've got to be kidding me. I was like, wow. So that was a new budgeting system to really be in my own head. Then once I really had to get sorted through that, I was just like, oh my God. Like, I had to start looking at it like, these people cost a lot of money. Why the hell are we sitting here doing 8-hour days? If I can say that I'm literally in this office and of 8 hours, I may be only really productive, like seriously productive for maybe 3 hours. Never mind the freaking commuting time, the hour or 2 hour commuter time that it took for you to get to the office and back home. So that's crazy.
Company every month. Now, before you say that these benefits aren't mandatory in the US, because, I mean, technically they aren't, well, the truth is that they're a standard for most decent companies, and we need to hire, like, decent people if we want to run a startup. Now, I come from a different country. I come from a country where all of this stuff is not optional. It's mandatory, and don't get me wrong, like, I think it's great for employees to be protected in case they get laid off, but that all costs money, and it's money that us, the businesses, it's money that we have to pay. But that's not the point of this. The point is that you would delete your Uber app in an instant if your fares moved 40%. And disclaimer, like, I'm not saying that us millennials are stingy. We're all struggling to make ends meet here. Like 40% more for our Uber rides is a lot of money. And so the math that I showed you still doesn't include liabilities, just the possibility of an employee suing you for, reason, or the time at work that people spend by the water cooler, or invited to a meeting where they didn't have to be in. What employees see on their paycheck is just about half of what the company is actually paying them every month. Well, here's a bright idea. Why don't you just pay someone for the hours, for the effective hours that they work for you? Well, here's a better idea. Why don't we hire someone in a city where it's a lot cheaper to live in? I mean, that model is maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe that work model is like the dream job of a gig worker.
How can I be a digital nomad, Riley? It's the number one question I get. I'm gonna break it down for you.
Working for a
that digital nomad-ish. So I was already leaning in that direction of where he was thinking. The issue with that is there's no way it would happen overnight. It would take decades to really hammer that through. And here's the problem: cost of housing, the cost of eating. If it was just a matter of what you were paying for, if housing costs weren't so much, if eating, even if you want to talk about the Uber stuff, no one wants to be paying as much money as, let's just be honest. When we're paying for Uber's deliveries, we're paying for a lot. We're not even considering the delivery cost, which is the cheapest thing on there. The tax is most likely gonna probably cost you just as much, or if not more, than the freaking delivery itself, especially the further the place that you're going out to. So if people only came in, only worked for, let's just say, like I said, 3 hours of work compared to the 8 hours there, you would still most likely have to work either multiple jobs to still make up what you would have to be able to put out for rent. And this is for anybody. I don't care if you're in freaking Idaho, you would still have to work a considerable amount of hours just to be able to equal up as to what you would have to pay monthly for your rent or your mortgage or whatever. So that's the difference with the way how we are so put forward as to how much we pay, just in taxes, just in living expenses. There's no way that we can actually bring ourselves back, because it would have to come with a deflation. As quite frankly, we don't deflate, we only inflate.
For a US company on a qualified, highly skilled type of job, getting paid something close to US rates, and living in a country where they don't need to spend nearly as much. Maybe they have 2 or 3 clients and they just add up hours with all of them. It's more than enough to live comfortably and to even save money.
Okay, but then he's saying basically what I said earlier. Then if you're going to hire these people who want to live in areas that are basically cheaper, right? Then you're also talking about jobs that are not skilled labor jobs where it's physical, because that means you need to hire people who are going to live in another country, because it wouldn't necessarily be your country. You would have to be in another country where the currency exchange is basically a lot easier to manage. So therefore, if they want to work, an entire week, if they want to work 20 hours in an entire week, they can, and still live a really good life. This is why they always try to show the freaking digital nomad shit that really pisses me off, because if you're here in the country, there's no way you can pull that off. There's just no way. We were just talking about it earlier, where basically you even see Joe Biden up there talking about we have this many jobs, but people are working multiple jobs. So no, it's not like you have multiple Americans working because you want to see how many jobs are actually being taken up. You have literally some Americans that are just working multiple jobs. It's rare that you're actually getting Americans these days that are just working one job. People are trying to pull income for many different revenue sources because they have to be able to survive that way.
Maybe they choose to do a 4-day work week, or maybe they take a break at 4 p.m. to go surfing. That's the poster card nomad life. But these cross-border salaries, they also have painful implications on locals. There's this town back home in Costa Rica called Nosara where locals make $600, $800 a year. They work hotels and restaurants, and they're basically serving people who make $4,000, $6,000 a month. I mean, it's the dream town for a digital nomad. You have the network, everybody else works on tech too, so you have a couple of VC funds even, but housing is very limited. Locals can no longer afford to live in the place that they were born. They've been displaced to other areas. Parts of the town flood during the rainy season, and that's of course where the locals have to live. We did a whole documentary on Osada. I'm going to link that below, but that's just the way of the world, right? We have to adapt. We can't stop globalization or remote work, but we are not necessarily looking ahead. As a generation, I don't think that we're planning ahead. We always complain about boomers, because boomers, they didn't look ahead, and they didn't look out for the planet. They didn't recycle. They didn't care about climate change until it was too late. And it's true, boomers, come on. My elementary school textbook still said that water was this infinite resource. But we're sort of doing the same thing. And the guy in Osada is not the example. These are all trained, skilled, qualified, internet savvy, financially literate gig workers. They're probably already doing half their work using GPT. These guys, man, they had enough disposable income to bet on
GPT and Google. Believe it or not, a lot of techs still Google how to fix their code. So it's not like, we're out here being geniuses and such. A lot of people have to look at code or ask Chat GPT to help clean their code. Actually, a lot of time it's not even really, from what I've seen, my personal experience, is a lot of it is not even just creating code. It's really cleaning up code. So he's got some points there.
Bitcoin early, and maybe they're millionaires because of that, or maybe they bet late and they lost money, but that still didn't really affect their livelihood. Soon enough, they're gonna save enough money, they're gonna buy some beachfront property. In a few years, they're gonna slow down on their work, they're gonna keep some of their clients, and they're gonna live happily ever after. I mean, these guys, they're fine. They're fine, but that's not what gig work means for everyone else. Just look at the other side of that exact equation. Take a graphic designer. So there's a graphic designer that lives in the US. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a major city. Let's say that they just graduated college, probably have some college debt that they have to pay for, and they are considering doing Upwork or Freelancer or Fiverr. Well, now they have to compete with that guy. Or tougher still, they have to compete with someone on the other side of the world. That contrast gets even bigger if you bring Southeast Asia into the mix, where a graphic designer can probably target $5 an hour and do great. And another disclaimer here, like this was a struggle for me to wrap my head around. In the West, in our side of the world, we understand that countries like Thailand or India are very affordable countries to live in, but we still assume that if someone is making $300 a month, they're living in poverty. I think it's really hard to wrap our head around living with $300 a month. Well, they don't. We flew there and we checked and we saw it for ourselves. That's a whole other video. It's one of my favorite videos that we produced, but sorry, I'm not gonna plug any more videos anymore. The point is, it's really hard to compete on online internet gig work if you live in a developed country. It's almost as
I mean, he's not lying at all. I mean, even when you think of a lot of the content creators that are purchasing editors, they really look for someone who's in a different time zone than them, just so they, by the time that they sleep or they have whatever the rest of their day, they go to sleep and they wake up, someone is working for them while they're sleeping, so that when they wake up, a video is already done. It's rather smart, to be honest with you, and because they're just so far away, and if they have the digital skills, you're getting the most bang for your buck, rather than you get somebody who's actually here, you know, within the States, and they're pretty much following the same time zone as you. You know, whether they're all the way in the East or they're all the way in the West, they're still following that same format, as that pretty much at the time when you're sleeping, they're pretty much in bed as well.
It's as if these platforms like Upwork, they were designed for US companies to hire freelancers overseas. Heck, it's not just hard to be a freelancer or a gig worker, it's hard to be a payroll employee these days, which actually brings me to this number. 44% of millennials in the US have more than one job. 64% are looking for some kind of side hustle. I get it, we spend more money than we should in those Starbucks, but I still bet most people would rather just have one job. And that's not just the US, by the way. Other countries are following suit with people having multiple jobs. Upwork estimates.
Well, that big one being China was pretty much what I covered before in our previous live, where we talked about how many influencers are out there in China, that as long as they are on live, that they're only pulling in, like, it was like $700 or something like that. It was like, and that was like 98% of them or something like that. It was crazy. It was really wild.
It's that the US will have 90 million freelancers by 2028, and that's a third of all US adults. Today, the large...
That's not far. We're at 60, what he said, 64. Actually, his chart right now says 76.4 million. That's not far at all to say that within 4 years, most people are going to be working gig jobs. So the question still remains. We see the decline, right? We see that there's an increase, there's a massive increase. Is traditional work going to be falling behind? I don't think it's going to be eliminated, but is it falling behind?
Largest group of people that have to do gig work is, of course, millennials and our friends, Gen Zs. Hi, Gen Zs. Gig workers, as you'd expect, experience more mental distress, more loneliness, less life satisfaction compared to full or to even part-time workers. They're actually much closer to unemployed people. And all of these, they're perfect.
Okay, I'll put my take on this, right? He's not wrong. It really does depend on how well you are doing, or I would say just what kind of industry that you're in. I'll use myself as an example of this. For me, it's a little different. I have some skills in the things that I do. I am always reaching out to do other things that are a little bit that I'm not so strong at, but I also have a good support system as well. So this doesn't work well for everyone. It is pretty much a hard line to get on, because you're not paid on a consistent basis, or you're not paid a large amount of compensation, or maybe you don't have a strong contract. You're just working on a gig to gig basis. You don't necessarily work a contract. are the fact that you do not have to really pay attention to your money. You don't really have things that you can just throw money away to. And you have to also consider like your insurance, things like that. That's a very expensive thing being on your own versus an actual company, which he even just explained himself. You're paying a lot more into your actual employees versus then you have to pay into yourself because you're also making a huge sacrifice when you're doing so. Uh, when you see the decline in the nation for people who are not really getting jobs because it's just really the same people getting multiple jobs just to be able to make ends meet, what's going to happen to companies because they're not really seeing a strong return on investments, especially if you're considering the retail world, the sales world. You're not seeing a good exchange. You're not seeing a lot of revenue. And even for companies to pay insurance into the very products that say get thefted, these places are closing down. So what are people to do who want to have stable work, who have to want not even stable work, but who wants to have a consistent income coming in? What are those people going to do?
Found problems in our society. We're trying to find ways to solve them and to solve them for today. But that's the short-term part of the problem. I think nobody's really talking about the long-term problem. Maybe we just can't find the time, or it's just too much to handle. Because the elephant in the room here is pensions. And we're already seeing the ripple effects. Only 27%, it's like a quarter of US workers today, are on track to having enough money to retire. I don't think that many of them realize that. 30% of gig workers do assume that they will never retire. 77% of gig workers assume that they will rely on personal savings to get by. And pension systems around the world, they were designed assuming that each adult was gonna be replaced by other adults. And they were definitely not designed around so many adults working just gig work. Now, before I go on, let's just line up on how the pension systems work around the world, because the social security tax, or whatever you call it in your country, well, you're paying social security, that's not going to like your own pool of money. These aren't your savings. There's not a government bucket for you. Right. You're effectively paying social security for the older generations, the ones who are currently retired. You're welcome.
So think about this. I want you guys to think about this, simmer on this for a little bit. If we are essentially paying so that retirement goes to the people who are already ahead of us, or elderly, right, for the social security, and we're running a gig economy that's still in the rising, right? So now all these things that need to get paid out are pretty much coming strictly to you, right? We're not even talking about the people who like make like 1099s or whatever, who are like severely, like just the money's just going straight to them. By the time that we're at retirement age and we're looking at, say this thing explodes, and we're looking at a grand majority of people working pretty much as gig workers, if they manage to actually work on a contract. Think about it. Will there be enough retirement for those who are older? For us, when we're older, when we're considering retiring? Or are we going to be forever the working class? You know, moving forward. It's something to consider. And keep in mind, everybody's going to start competing. And if this is something that's happening here in the US, guarantee you it's going to be something that's going to sweep out to the rest of the world. It will become a common thing.
Welcome, boomers. Pension systems around the world were designed with that premise in mind. As new humans come into the world, they have jobs, not gig jobs, but actual jobs that pay social security, contribute to the system for their elders. When they get old, new humans support them. Now, this not only works at like this macroeconomic level, it's supposed to work like on a household level too. I don't want my kid to have to look after me when I'm old, but hey, like if my YOLO calls don't pay up, and at least I have a basement to crash if I'm totally broke. I'm half kidding on that, but most millennial households, they don't have kids. They don't want kids. They're buying pets instead. We made a video about that. Sorry, I won't plug any more videos. And well, dogs don't pay social security. Most dogs don't have basements that you can crash. So what happens when the number of humans actually starts shrinking? Which it is. Will this happen?
It is actually the 14th day of nationwide protests, unions and labor groups leading those demonstrations. And earlier today, dozens of
people are protesting across France today over the country's new retirement system.
These protests erupted all over France because the government tried to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64 years old. For one simple reason, the pension system is broken. There are fewer people alive to support it, and pensioners are living longer because health got better. The country has had to go into debt to maintain their own system because, just to give you some numbers, in the year 2000, you had 2.1 workers for each retiree. By 2020, you had 1.7 workers. And by 2070, the country is expected to have 1.2 workers per retiree. That means there are more people that need a pension and just fewer young workers to support them. And well, France is a developed country. I mean, they have one of the best pension systems in the world. They have a very low rate of pensioners that have any risk of falling into poverty. But in the end, even today, this is the country's money. It's tax money, or debt that eventually gets paid with tax money. That's sustaining everyone. And it looks like French millennials don't want to pay more for that.
Je me tue au travail 2 ans de plus parce que franchement, regardez le nombre de personnes qui meurent au travail. Il y a beaucoup de personnes qui meurent au travail.
Now, big disclaimer, I'm really oversimplifying this issue. I'm sorry, but it's just material for a whole other video, maybe a little bit outside our scope, maybe one for Johnny Harris to make. But
so, for what I gathered, kind of screwed. This is just something that's happening across the globe, but even when we look at millennials, right? Hi, I'm a millennial. He's right. A lot of millennials are getting dogs and cats, and that's on the rise. It's not slowing down. It's actually on the rise. Before, we used to see a lot of women with these damn dogs and cats, but now we're seeing guys becoming, cat dads and shit like that. And as far as Generation Z, Gen Z right now is like, they're not really interested in a lot of stuff. They're not even interested in the idea of really starting families and procreating. So quite frankly, we're really, really slowing down the idea of repopulating a lot of places. What is this going to do not only for people that are retiring, right? But what is it going to do for the entire system of just how we work, how we grow, how we innovate for the future? Because it seems like, personally speaking, that the human race across the globe is becoming more and more selfish. So how long before we are so selfish, we are no longer interested in collaborating with one another before we just head into a very dark place? That's what's just going in my mind. So something to think about.
Don't get angry, French people. Point is if we're still working when we're 64, which we probably will, then that's just going to be a lot more taxes for us and a massive tax burden for the generations that come after us. So let's look at this perfect storm. Millennials need to have multiple jobs to get by. In other words, a single job today is apparently not enough to sustain a human, or at least our spending habits. Many millennials and Gen Zs choose not to have kids because they can't afford them. In the US, raising a kid costs around $14,000 a year. So many millennials have spent their lives working gig jobs. That means that they haven't really had time or money to think about a pension or to start a 401k. And even if they have one, it's just based on the payroll side of their income, not the gig side of their income. And to make...
Okay, so he's pretty much running into an area where I pretty much agree with him going all the way. For these particular videos that I was actually going into, I didn't even know I was going to be in for so long. I didn't even watch the videos ahead of time, so it was really, really, really interesting to go about all that. That's a really, really good question. I didn't even think about it from before. I was really jumping at this in terms of the gig economy and how things are moving when it comes to it. But now it just puts a whole new question in my head. If the gig economy is here and we don't really have a real system for working, for being able to take care of a lot of people's needs, because we're still running on an archaic society when it comes to working 8 hours, and we haven't figured out a new way to make things work. How exactly are we going to be moving it for the future? I mean, sorry. Even when I think of what are we doing when it comes to automation, right? The automation has come up and exploded. Automation, AI, so we have robotics and AI that's pretty much moved hand in hand when it came to working with the human race, and now pretty much they are jumping well ahead. And we still haven't found more human-friendly ways to be able to keep jobs, because companies are seeing more uses to have these particular things in place and reducing the actual workforce. And you could look at it and say it a way like, hey, maybe it's not that bad because people will be able to get access to the things that they're actually looking for, because companies that have a particular product or particular AIs or robotics in place can produce more goods, right? Cool. You could say that. But then if we don't have a lot of people to be able to purchase those goods, because quite frankly, the human race is dwindling, what does that say for the future of not just us, but also for those who are coming up? What's their future going to be looking like? And it's very, very interesting question that just pops into my mind. I'm gonna do some thoughts of it, because shoot, I'm thinking about the people who I know, family and all, who are pretty much at their retirement age, and now I got to think about what happens with me when should I at this point is the question, is should I even retire? I'm only 42. Who knows the retirement age, what it will get boosted up to by the time we even get to that point, if I even make it to that point. That's another thing altogether. If we don't figure out a way to sort out how things are going to be made, or how things are going to be paid for the future, I just think there needs to be some regulation. And honestly, I think deflation needs to happen in increments. It won't happen. I just don't see it happening because people are greedy, and it always has been that way. I never understood why our nation is a nation of worker bees, honestly speaking, but it is what it is. That was pretty much the conversation that I wanted to have for today. We have the gig economy, more people entering the gig workforce from just 2 years ago to last year to the massive jump that we are in now, saying that basically 76. And I'll go to confirm those numbers or not, because I don't know if that could just be what his estimates were, but I'll do the research myself. But if he's saying that basically like 76.4 million people are now been entering the gig economy, and it's going to skyrocket past that to basically being in the trillions in just 4 more years, traditional work is almost over. If you don't work in a field that, say, like, medical, tech, or media, and even that's becoming oversaturated, what exactly is that going to say for millions of Americans here today? What's that going to say about you and our future? What's it going to say about if you have children? What's it going to say about them? Maybe you don't have children. Maybe you got nieces and nephews and such. What's it going to say about them? Because it's only but some point, we can only go but so far to reach a point where we say, I'm not worried about them, I have to be worried about me. But quite frankly, we can already see the younger generation is saying it's all about us. It's not about y'all. And they're doing it ahead faster than what we're thinking about. A lot of us who are older, and even those who are older than I am, have been thinking about securing a safe environment for the future. And the future is basically saying, I'm not thinking about the future at all. I just want to have fun now. I'm not thinking about safeguarding a whole lot in the future. I got something new to think about. Anyway, guys, that's enough of my time. I didn't even think it was going to be going this long. I got to figure out what the hell's going on with my system. Anyway, I will be seeing you guys. I have to think about when I'm actually going to see you guys, because I'll be doing some traveling later this week. Outside of that, you guys let me know, what exactly are you thinking about in terms of the gig economy? How do you feel like the future is going to work out when it comes to the workforce? Are there any particular industries that you think are going to basically be leveling themselves out, if not becoming eradicated altogether? How does it look for us when it comes to like goods and services? For those who, of course, you got to be able to reach out to me. I have different mediums to do so. So, of course, I'll just put that here on the bottom. You can catch me here on my Twitter, of course. Then if not from there, I'm always here. I'm always here doing this thing, and I'm going to be updating. So you can actually catch me over here as well. So just be sure to look out on a lot of those different things. And of course, if you want to be able to support in any way possible, you can be able to do so. Every dollar pretty much goes into how I can be able to build better quality for this, whether it's going to be new camera equipment, new lighting, all this stuff, because things are getting very stringent in this world. So we got to figure out a whole bunch of things. Outside of that, I do appreciate those who actually showed up today. Sorry, this episode was a little bit off because everything was off kilter. I got to figure out what's going on here, and I got to prepare for how I'm going to be able to give you content at least for the next week or so, because I am going to be in a total different location. I will be sure to put up videos and pictures and all kind of stuff like that over the time as well. And outside of that, I would basically say that you guys should be able to take care of yourself. Do some thinking about what today's episode was on. If you didn't catch it, be sure to get it on the replay and give me your thoughts. Of course, I'm going to be paying attention as always to the comment section, so be sure to actually write what you're thinking about. And if you have any particular comments or actually topics of your own that you think would be good to cover, be sure to do that as well. Of course, I didn't show it, but you can also reach out to me at Reslaopinionated@gmail.com. Of course, if you haven't already, like the video, and of course you can subscribe if that's something you're into, and I will see you on the next one. Of course, as always, stay opinionated. I'll see you next time. Later, y'all.